For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started. And here we have it, guys. The much anticipated debate between Dr. Kent Hovind and Tony Reed. Beforehand, I want to thank both these men for agreeing to this debate. It was a blast, it was engaging, and it was definitely one to remember. Now, before we start the debate, I want to let everybody know that there were some technical difficulties for the first part of it. What happened was Tony Reed's connection wasn't working as well as it should have been, and his opening statement was barely heard and understood due to these technical difficulties. Therefore, we had Tony jump out and come back on with his phone. Because of this, his slides were not visible. What we did for this debate, and in the posting of this debate on Standing for Truth, was remove the portion where Tony Reed experienced the technical difficulties during his opening presentation. Now, when he came back on, we had him restart. So he still got his full time. We made sure that both debaters had equal time. It went smooth. It went respectful for the most part. If you want to see the full debate in its entirety with the technical difficulties that occurred at the beginning, you can go over to Modern Day Debates channel and watch that debate. But we wanted this one to be more clean and more easy for viewing purposes. Anyways, before the debate starts, here are the three trailers. Trailer 1, the final warning, and the teaser for the debate. Enjoy, guys.
Well, here I am.
The greatest gladiator match in the history of the world.
This Friday, the wait is over. Because it's going down. And this is your final warning.
Tell me, do you plead your will?
Dr. Kent Hovind, Tony Reed, creation versus evolution, which has more scientific application? You do not want to miss out on this one. The world will never be the same. There was an idea to bring together two men to battle it out against worldviews. Creation versus evolution, which has more scientific application? Dr. Kent Hovind takes on Tony Reed today at 8 p.m. EST on Modern Day Debate. With Standing for Truth moderating. Be there.
Hey everybody, today we are debating creation evolution, and we are starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for this epic debate. Thanks for your patience as we've had a couple of technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience. Oh, you guys, I'm sorry. I'm working on my doctorate, and I'm teaching 2 classes on my own now, and so it's like I'm swamped. So I just want to say, for those of you who have helped this channel, of which tons of you have, thank you so much, because to be honest, I'm oftentimes feeling overwhelmed, and so you have no idea how much I appreciate all your positive feedback and love and support. I cannot express how excited I am and how thankful I am for the speakers who have joined us tonight, who are both linked in the description so that you can go check out their content. If you enjoy it, now you can conveniently click on their links down in the description. Also, this is the first time we've ever done a pre and post debate poll. Namely, you can vote on the topic of tonight's debate. We'll let you check that out down in the description. And want to let you know, if this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we are trying to build an eclectic community of Christians, atheists, Republicans, Democrats, you name it. We want you here, and we're glad you are here. So with that, we will kick it off to Standing for Truth, who helped organize this debate. He's just going to go over the format and get our speakers going for their statements. So thanks so much again, gentlemen, for being here tonight. And Standing for Truth, the floor is yours.
In this section of the debate, for only approximately 2 minutes, the two debaters, Tony Reed and Dr. Ken Hovind, and myself, and as you know, I was moderating, was muted. All I did here was thank the debaters for their time and gave them my appreciation for not only giving us their time, but agreeing to the debate. As you will see here, the debate is a blast. You guys are going to love it. And we fixed it up here and made sure that it is a lot more clean. I also go over the format for the debate, which consists of openings that are approximately 12 minutes. The rebuttals went approximately 12 minutes each as well, followed by a discussion portion and a very, very good question and answer that I think everybody's going to like. I then handed it over to Dr. Ken Hovind to go over his opening presentation. And just about the first 30 seconds or so of his opening was muted before it came to our attention that we were muted, and James fixed it. Guys, enjoy.
All set. Thank you.
There you go. Anyway, I thought that might be a little easier for the ad hominem attacks, which are certain to follow these things. That's all they've got is ad hominem. Can't attack the message, so let's attack the messenger. Anyway, you wanted to pick up, somebody wants to pick up that I'm dishonest. I'd like to see where exactly. Anyway, you can read all the comments about that. So, okay. The Bible says the scorners delight in their scorning. And as I watched, probably 4 or 5 is all I had time for, Tony. I apologize. 4 or 5 of your thing. I would have to say you're a typical scorner and scoffer warned about in the Bible. And I'd like to try to win you over to Christ. I think you've got a sharp mind, and it's being used for the wrong thing. And we'll see what if we can fix that. God's word has a lot to say about your type. Okay. Uniformitarianism is taught in schools that the way things are happening now is the way they've always been happening. Is this real science? Is that true, that things happen slowly over millions of years? And what is the scientific application of uniformitarianism? It's certainly taught in the school. In geology, the doctrine suggests the Earth's geologic processes acted the same in the same manner with essentially the same intensity in the past as they do in the present. From Encyclopedia Britannica. Really? Okay. Earth's geologic processes were the same intensity in the past and the present, and that is sufficient to account for all geologic change. I don't know about that. Berkeley University said, I had a whole article about uniformitarianism by Charles Lyell here, that thanks to the pioneering work of William Smith, he organized rock formations into a single colossal record of Earth's history. Is this geologic column really telling Earth's history? Many geologists saw on the record a stormy epoch, one in which our planet had been convulsed repeatedly by abrupt changes. Mountains were built in catastrophic instants. Oh, okay. Giant tropical plants, for example, left their fossils in northern Europe during the Carboniferous period. Earth's history might not fit a strict biblical narrative any longer. Oh, that's what they started teaching. But these revolutions seem to be a sign that it did have a direction. And you can read all this for yourself. Catastrophism. Really, Buffon and some other guys claimed the Earth had begun as a hot ball of rock. Okay, here's a public old textbook right here on my shelf. Earth is thought to be 4.6 billion years old. It began as a hot ball of rock. Is this part of the real science that you were taught, Tony, and you would like us to teach everybody else, that the Earth began as a hot ball of rock? And what is the scientific application for this theory? To teach the kids we all came from a rock. 4.543 billion years ago, the Earth formed. Is that really part of science? And what would be the scientific application for that? the purpose of this debate is to discuss the scientific application of your religion of evolution. Okay? What is the part of this one says, in the oceans 3.5 billion years ago, scientists believed the first living organisms appeared. True or not is not the question now, but what is that part of real science? And what would the application of that be? 3.5 billion years ago, life got started. Is this part of real science, or is this something somebody chooses to believe? There is evidence that life began in the earlier part of this 1 billion year range. What on earth is the scientific application of this? This is taught in the books. What application would that possibly have? How about this timeline showing Earth, the formation of the Earth 4.56 billion years ago, slowly coming up to humans today? These timelines the textbooks are loaded with this kind of propaganda. Is this part of real science, and what is the scientific application? I mean, what good is this doing? We're wasting textbook space. I mean, I think in biology class, they ought to be teaching, biology. In earth science class, they should be teaching the science of the earth. There's a million things you can learn without referring to evolution or creation, okay? Psychology, evolution of earth and life on earth. What on earth does this have to do with psychology? Is this part of the scientific application of evolution? They show the timeline from the sun igniting and then the earth forming and everything coming. The books are full of this kind of propaganda. What is the scientific application of this? I don't understand how this applies to science. This one shows humans and insects and fish have a common ancestor. What is the scientific application of that? Is that what you want people to be taught, Tony? Anyway, the Earth's been cooling through time. They argued that the tropical plants of Europe must have lived during the warmer times. And there were sudden, violent uplifts of mountains and volcanic eruptions. Oh, so is it true that uniformitarianism is the present, is the key to the past? In other words, the way things are happening now is the way they've always been happening? I don't think that's true. I think that's a lie number 6 in my video series of 75 lies in the textbook. The catastrophes can change things rapidly. For example, do you think this little creek flowing through this gash right here made that gash? Or is this quite obviously, to anybody with one eye and half the brain, a result of a dam failure? That little creek did not carve that gash. The lake was full of water. It got over the top, found a weak spot, and carved out a notch in seconds. So that gash did not carve, that little creek did not carve that gash. And this little creek at the bottom of Grand Canyon did not form this gash either. Grand Canyon's 18 miles wide, a mile deep, 277 miles long. That little creek did not carve that canyon. Now, if you wish to believe it did, that's your business, but that's not part of science. What would the scientific application be? Textbook says over millions of years, the Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon from solid rock. Really? Is this really part of science? And what would be the scientific application for this? Why would they teach this stuff in an earth science book? Not true. The Bible says in the last days there would be scoffers who would come and be walking after their own lust. There's the problem right there. They don't want that book telling them what to do is the problem. You did a program, I thought it was classic. You have loads of videos on the internet showing your scorning, condescending attitude toward God and the Bible and his laws. It just happened to freeze frame on Charlton Heston with the 10 Commandments pointing right to Tony. That was pure accidental. You love to mock those who believe God created the world and the global flood. This seems to be your modus operandi. Tony, you're a scorner and a scoffer, just as God predicted would come, and I'm going to try to help you. I'm your friend, and you don't know that yet. A wise son heareth his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. A scorner will not listen when somebody rebukes him. A scorner seeketh wisdom and findeth it not. A scorner loveth not one that reproveth him. You probably will hate me when this is over, but you come visit Dinosaur Adventureland, we'll give you a tour, and I'll lead you to Jesus Christ. A scorner won't hear it. Scorner seeks wisdom, can't find it. Scorner doesn't love the one that reproves him. Smite a scorner, and the simple will beware. What I'm going to have to do tonight, after listening to a couple of your programs, is going to, not physically, but verbally, smite you and correct you on some of the dumb stuff you've been teaching, so that the simple people say, wow, he's wrong, Hovind's right, the Bible's right. That's what I'm trying to do here, okay? The scoffers are going to say, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. This is uniformitarianism. The scoffers are going to teach the way things are happening now is the way they've always been happening. Long, slow, gradual changes. The skull gradually gets longer and the eyebrows get bigger and you slowly turn from an ape to a human. This is all uniformitarianism, prophesied 2,000 years ago that it was going to happen, and they're here. The Bible says they are willingly ignorant, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, First thing they're ignorant of is the creation. Secondly, whereby the world that then was being overflowed with water perished. They're ignorant of the flood in the days of Noah. Thirdly, they're ignorant about the coming judgment, the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. So the scoffers are ignorant of the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment. This is what our ministry is all about, drdino.com. Come on down, see our place. Facebook, YouTube, Kent Hovind Official. And you can give us a call, 855-BIG-DINO. I'm extension 3. I take 100 phone calls a day. Who changed the truth of God into a lie, it says in Romans, and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Tony, I'm worried that's what you're trying to do, and you're trying to encourage other people to believe like you believe. It's bad enough that you want to believe that, but when you encourage others to believe something that's obviously turning them away from God, I think you might want to think about that. You say fossils. When you see a fossil, you think millions of years, rather than admit there was a flood in the days of Noah. The very existence of fossils. How many fossils are forming today in your state? How many animals get killed today, and how many fossilize? Millions get killed every day, but none fossilize. Fossilization is a rare event, and yet there are trillions of fossils. We got a museum full of them here. What is the scientific application of believing mammoth is millions of years old? What is the scientific application of that, the purpose of the debate, Tony? James Hutton wrote a book in 1795, and he said the earth is millions of years old. And that started the problem. The Bible dates, if you add them up, we get my chart here. Adam was 130 when Seth was born. The Bible dates clearly add up to teach the earth is about 6,000 years old. So somebody is clearly wrong about this. So what is the scientific application of these two theories? Well, if the Bible is right and God created it, I think we should look for order in nature. I think there would be order. I think there would be symbiotic relationships, like certain animals require certain plants or other animals. Symbiotic relationship. I think the Bible best explains that. The Bible says the plants were made on day 3 and the sun was made on day 4. I think that would work. The Bible says the plants and animals were made within a few days of each other. That would have a scientific application, because animals breathe in oxygen, give off CO2. Plants breathe in CO2, give off oxygen. They reciprocate the gases. How does that work with the evolutionism religion? The Bible says there was water above the earth. You did quite a video on Walt Brown's hydroplate theory. I'd be glad to talk with you about that. I think you misrepresented what he said in several spots, and I think you completely don't understand. I'll be glad to explain that to you. Not that I can prove that it's correct, but I think it's more correct than thinking the whole earth was squeezed into a dot smaller than a period on a page. That's dumb. That's what evolution teaches. The whole universe was squeezed into that dot. The Bible says the earth is the Lord's. He founded it upon the seas, established it upon, that's what the Bible says. He laid up the depth in storehouses. The earth was above the water. So the Bible clearly teaches there was water in the crust of the earth. That water came shooting out, and that's where the flood water came from. There is enough water on the planet right now to cover the entire earth 8,000 feet deep. If you smoothed it out, these oceans would come up and cover everything 8,000 feet deep. Where did all this water come from, Tony? Was it all squeezed into that dot smaller than a period on a page? Do you think evolution theory is more scientific to say everything came from an explosion of nothing? And you want that to be taught as science? The Bible says in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 14th day of the month, anyway, all the fountains of the deep broke. I'm out of time. Anyway, I think the creation story is much more scientific. God made it. It was destroyed by a flood. That explains all the fault lines we see. It explains everything that I can say. I don't know of anything that cannot be explained by the simple young earth creation story. And if you got something you'd like me to elaborate on, I'd be honored to do so. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that opening statement there, Dr. Hovind. I just want to let the audience know that we've seen the comments in the chat. It looks like the first couple minutes introduction by James and myself were muted, and James assured us that that'll be fixed by the end. So no worries, guys. We're going to jump right into Tony Reed and his opening statement. You can go ahead whenever you're ready, Tony.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Tony Reed. I write, produce, and I host a show called How Creationism Taught Me Real Science. Oops, hold on a second. My apologies here. Technical issues. Anyway, in my show, I start with the creationist arguments, and then I test them against the actual published science. Usually the creationist arguments are found to be lacking, but every once in a while the creationist argument is right, but for the wrong reasons. I also play the voice of God in Prophet of Zod's cartoon series, an extremely well-written show I'm proud you let me be a part of. I'd also like
Now, right here is where Tony Reed is supposed to give his opening statement. Now, right off the bat, he starts experiencing technical difficulties. His connection is low, unfortunately, which is fine. But what we did here was remove this section for a cleaner viewing. Now, what we did, as I explained in the beginning, was had him come back on through his phone, and everything went perfectly. The very beginning, there's some slight glitches, but after that, the whole debate goes smooth, no issues. He gets his whole opening presentation, we have him restart. Therefore, if you do want to see the 5 or 10 minutes of technical difficulties, if you feel that something was taken out, you can go over to the Modern Day Debate channel and watch the full debate with the section here that we removed with technical difficulties. Anyways, continue on and enjoy.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
All right, well, this is frustrating, but okay. So I don't know where I left off.
I have to be honest, it's the last like 5 or 6 minutes were really hard to hear, and I was kind of hanging in there because I was hoping it might clear up. Given that we do have a little extra time tonight, I think we'll probably be okay with if you want to backtrack and maybe start at near the beginning of your PowerPoint. That would probably be about where we lost you.
Give him all the time he wants. We're fine here.
Thank you.
Start over, Tony.
We'll let you, just to be safe, we'll let you start over, Tony. I think that's a good idea. Thanks for allowing that.
You guys are quite gracious here. All right, so the topic of the debate today is whether evolution or creationism has more scientific application. In past debates and presentations, Mr. Hovind claimed that evolution is a religion. When challenged at creation events and worldwide floods,
Oh, I just want to stop Tony there and make sure, because we can hear an echo. It could be because you have the video on in the background too. Make sure that's shut off.
I don't have the video on in the background.
It's definitely better now, though, for some reason. Maybe it's a coincidence.
Okay, but I don't have the video on the background, so I don't know where the echo is coming from.
Now it's actually better, though. The echo is gone. So
right,
what?
I have no idea what happened there. Okay, so for the purpose of this debate, I'm just going to work on the assumption that evolution is 100% wrong, creationism is 100% correct. I'm not even going to try to get anyone to stop believing in creationism. What I am going to do is demonstrate that even if creationism is 100% correct, it is still scientifically useless. And even if evolution is 100% wrong, it still has scientific applications that we all take advantage of. Because of the debate, I'm going to be treating both views, yes, even creationism, for a theory. We're not claiming that any theory is ever proven. We're also not discussing individual phenomena that are consistent with the theory. What we're talking about is the confirmation of scientific predictions made by the theory. This is how new discoveries and real-world applications are made. Predictions, in turn, are presented in the form of a hypothesis, and very simply it goes like we
think we're losing
observation C is to observation C, and then whether you
I think, Tony, I'm so sorry. This argument that you're laying out right now is, I know that you said, I think, premise or operation C, but we've been like not able to hear you. It's been kind of drifting out for the last 20 seconds. I think we lost Tony. I still see his picture on the Zoom window, but
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So again, like I said, discoveries, new real world applications are made by predictions. Predictions in turn are presented in the form of hypotheses. Very simply, it goes like this. If theory A is true, we should expect to see phenomenon B when we conduct experiment or observation C. The next obvious step is to conduct experiment or observation C. determine whether you see phenomenon B as theory A predicted. Now, having seen Mr. Hovind debate numerous times, he's historically presented the prediction, if creationism is true, we should expect to see the fossils of dead organisms buried in the earth. Problem with this prediction is that it's being done backwards. There is no record of any creationist ever making any predictions about fossils before the first fossil was discovered. So apparently Mr. Hovind didn't get the memo on predictions. They're supposed to be made before the discovery is made. Otherwise, it's not a prediction. It's a post-diction. And it's very easy to see fossils in the ground and then only then say that you predicted it all along. But it's a completely different thing to predict something that has never been seen before and then find it. So to be fair, fossils were discovered long before evolutionary theory. The difference lies in that evolutionary theories have predicted specific fossils being found in specific strata in very specific locations before they were discovered. For example, in 1881, the lone lobe-finned fish Eustenopteron was found in 385 million year strata. In 1932, Ichthyostega was discovered in 365 million year old strata. Now, neither of these were discovered by testing any evolutionary predictions, but using the theory of common descent, Edward B. Deschler, Neil H. Shubin, and Farish A. Jenkins Jr. were able to predict ahead of time that they should expect to find a fossil of a creature which appeared to have wrist bones similar to tetrapods, rays similar to ray-finned fishes, with spiracles in the head, which would be indicative of a lung system, in addition to what's called a pectoral girdle separating the head from the body, which makes room for a neck. They predicted that this morphological combination of tetrapod and fish-like traits would be found in Devonian strata between Ichthyostega and Eustenopteron on Ellesmere Island, Nunavut in northern Canada. And after 5 years of excavation, they found no less than 3 individuals matching those exact traits. And these individuals were named Tiktaalik. So whenever you see timelines of tetrapod to mammal evolution, land-dwelling mammals to whales and dolphins, horses, or even human evolution, this same assumption has told scientists where to look stratigraphically as well as geographically for those thousands of these individual fossil species showing transitional traits. That's whether or not they are actually transitional species or whether they're actual ancestors of anything. Common descent has repeatedly made and continues to make to this day these kinds of predictions. You will never see the assumption of a worldwide flood or a 6-day creation event used to find any newly discovered fossil species. Mr. Hovind has also for decades proposed that there are 6 definitions for evolution, and I'll be happy to address how each of these definitions is a misrepresentation. But for the sake of this debate, to the disgust of anyone scientifically literate, I'm going to use all 6 of Mr. Hovind's definitions for evolution, and I'll even propose that you add uniformitarianism as the 7th, since you do talk about it. Mr. Hovind has claimed that the flood model predicts that there should be strata in the earth. And again, this prediction is backward. There is no record of any creationist ever making any predictions about strata before strata were observed. Without bothering to go over the weaknesses of his theory of hydrological sorting, uniformitarianism, which requires an old Earth, is used every day by geologists to predict where to find minerals like oil, coal, gas, etc. So if you drive a car, you are benefiting from the scientific application of assuming an old Earth. So to date, no geologist has ever discovered any of these minerals by assuming a worldwide flood. Now, we also discussed, if I'm not mistaken, or I did not discuss it, Mr. Hovind discussed the idea of, I believe it was symbiosis. He talked about it today, I believe. Okay, so here's the thing. As an example, he's often said, he's actually predicted that again, which of course that's after it's been discovered. He stated that plants and animals need each other because Animals need oxygen to breathe, which is exhaled by plants. Plants, in turn, need carbon dioxide to breathe, which is exhaled by animals, something like that. The point being that neither could exist without the other. These are, okay, so the terrestrial planets, Venus, Earth, and Mars, of course there's Mercury, but it's far too close to the sun, has far too little gravity to have an atmosphere worth considering. But the other three all have atmospheres and water of some sort. Now, Venus is closer to the sun, has an atmosphere of carbon dioxide. Mars is further from the sun and has an atmosphere of carbon dioxide. Earth is in the middle of them both and has an atmosphere of both oxygen and carbon dioxide. It's the only one which we know of that also has life. If Earth were to have formed from the same accretion disk as Mars and Venus, it too would have had an atmosphere of carbon dioxide to begin with. This would mean that plants would not need animals to survive and, given enough time, would be able to fill the atmosphere with oxygen. This would predict that the earliest fossil-bearing strata in the Earth would show no signs of oxygen. We can tell if there's oxygen present in a geological period by the presence of what are called rusted iron banding. So to be more accurate, we should see diminishing to non-existent amounts of rusted iron bands as we reach deeper and deeper strata. As it happens, that is exactly what we see. The earliest life we've ever discovered is from nearly 4 billion-year-old strata, but we don't see the first rusted iron banding until nearly 500 million years later in the early to middle Archean. Incidentally, we don't see plants nor animals in the geological column until 3 billion years after that. Then, as now, the vast majority of the oxygen...
So sorry to stop you there, Tony. I think you've got about a minute. I lost track there with all the tech difficulties there, but unless you're keeping track, that would help.
This was timed for about 10 minutes. So let me just, I'll cover the other part about the Big Bang and all that if you want to discuss it. But that said, these are predictions that the assumption of evolution makes. List of predictions goes on and on. I'll be happy to address more, but my point here, like I said before, is that even if evolution were 100% wrong and creationism were 100% correct, creationism still has exactly zero practical applications, while evolutionism, if my supporters will forgive me for using the term, has endless scientific applications that we are privileged enough to be able to take for granted every day. And this is why evolution is taught as science and why creationism has no place in a science class whatsoever. There we go.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that opening there, Tony. To the debaters, we can either just do a obviously fairly moderated, open discussion, equal time, no interruptions from this point, since we had some issues there, unless you wanted to go into like a strictly timed rebuttal round. What would you guys prefer?
I'd like to address some of the points he made. Give me whatever time I take. He can take the same time.
Beautiful. That sounds good, Dr. Hovind. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Yes, Tony, you got quite a few things. I'd love to have to take a couple hours on some of these, but about the Earth having just the right amount of oxygen, et cetera, for life. You know, Venus is too much CO2 and Mercury is too hot and Mars is too cold. Does it ever occur to you that maybe that would be a prediction that the Creator designed this planet to hold life, and this is the only one that holds life that we know of? You guys spend an awful lot of money looking for life everywhere else, but nothing's ever been found for sure. So I think maybe that'd be, and the idea that predictions and backwards, I think you really are completely missing the point on this one, Tony. If a police officer comes to an accident and tries to investigate and find out who did what, who hit who was where, what were the cars going, they don't sit around the police office and predict, oh, there's going to be an accident on 4th Street in 20 minutes, let's go find it. They wait till after the accident and go find it and try to figure out what happened. This is perfectly logical, common sense 101, to go find a fossil in the dirt and say, wow, what happened? And you guys put all of your emphasis on these fossils, and you're completely missing the point. No fossils count as evidence for evolution. None. You don't know those bones had any children, and you certainly don't know they had different children that lived. And if an animal did produce a different baby that was different than itself, who would that one marry? You've got a host of problems. The fact is, every farmer on the planet in the history of the world can tell you cows produce cows, dogs produce dogs. There are no exceptions. None. Now, if you want to use a fossil as evidence, that's ludicrous. In a court of law, they'd laugh you out, saying you don't know these bones had any kids. Now, you come across something like this in California. What happened here? Was this slow, gradual sinking of the highway, or is this maybe a catastrophe, like an earthquake or something? Which would have more predictive, which would have more explanatory power, a catastrophe or slow, gradual uniformitarianism? How about this? You come across this situation. Wow. Did this happen slowly, or is this a result of a catastrophe? Oh, how about this? You think they laid the railroad tracks that way? Or do you think maybe this is a result of a catastrophe of some kind, the earth shifting back and forth? So which has better explanatory power, a catastrophe or gradual uniformitarianism? You're supposed to defend the idea that the evolution theory, which is uniform gradual changes, can explain things. I don't think gradual changes can explain this or this. I think this is a result of a catastrophe. I think anybody with one eye and half a brain and common sense would say, this was a disaster, something happened here. And you couldn't predict it necessarily. I mean, they try to predict earthquakes, but good luck with that one. Ask the folks that have been trying for decades. They just happen. How about lightning strikes? Can you predict that? One hit the tree outside our building here a couple of days ago. So the Bible warned us the scoffers would come, and they would walk after their lust, and they would not endure sound doctrine. I think I could look at a map of, say, San Francisco Bay. You go all the way from Redding to Bakersfield, California, and it's very low elevation, beautiful farmland in here, because it obviously was once a big lake. Which has more scientific application? Slow gradual erosion or catastrophic failure? Would it be common sense to say there might have been an earth dam across here where now San Francisco is, backing up a big lake? After who knows when, a number of years, it went over the top, washed out the dam, and drained the lake. And now we have beautiful soil at the bottom of the lake. I think that's easy to explain. I think El Paso, Texas is the same way. Why is it called El Paso? Because it's the pass through the mountains. If on each side, north and south of El Paso, there are mountains. If you were to plug that area up right across there with a dam, a big lake would fill in. I think sometime probably after Noah's flood, the lake spilled over the top and carved out El Paso in a short time. So the people say Grand Canyon, the textbook says Grand Canyon was cut by the Colorado River slowly over millions of years. That's ludicrous. That's lie number one in my series I talk about. It's just not common sense. The top of Grand Canyon is 8,000 feet above sea level. Where it starts cutting is less than 3,000 feet. Rivers don't flow uphill in Arizona or Alabama. Or I never did get here what state you're from or your background. I didn't get here that. But anyway, so James Hutton's book started this whole thing, and I'll skip some of this here, but you can watch my video series. The key is the present is not the key to the past. Catastrophes are everywhere. And I mean, evidence of catastrophes. And you can't always predict a catastrophe. You go there after it happened and say, whoa, what happened here? And they try to put the pieces together. This is detective work 101. So I think when they got to the top of Mount Everest, they found petrified clams in the closed position. Closed clams. I would look at this evidence and say, what happened here? Apparently the clam was buried alive and couldn't even open. Today, you can walk along the beach and find 1 billion seashells, but you hardly ever find a matched pair. So finding a matched pair of seashells closed and petrified, I think it would be common sense 101 to say it was buried alive before it couldn't even open. Today, a clam dies, opens, the seagulls eat it, the crabs eat it, something eats it, it's gone in minutes, and it falls apart into 2 shells. These are found 10 feet thick in North Alabama, beds of petrified closed clams 10 feet thick. Did this happen slowly by gradual uniformitarian processes, or were those clams buried in a catastrophe? The very fact that we find fossils at all is evidence of a catastrophe, because animals die all the time and they get scattered around by the coyotes and buzzards. They don't fossilize, and they certainly don't fossilize where the bones are all still articulated. You showed a picture of a guy standing on the back of a turtle working on another fossil, and the turtle's standing upright. Look at your own pictures, Tony. This had to be rapid burial with a whole lot of strata forming very quickly. This isn't slow gradual accumulation of strata. You showed a picture of what is obviously a result of catastrophe. And the Noah's flood would explain all that. Real world applications. What on earth is the real world application of digging up bones in the dirt and claiming it's the ancestor of somebody when you don't know it had any kids? The real world application for creation is, I predict, as we dig almost any place on the planet, we're going to find strata. Why would there be limestone layers, one layer that covers nearly the whole United States? Was that slow, gradual accumulation, or would that be maybe Noah's flood? Why would there be layers of gravel? We've got gravel. This is a gravel pit we live in here. Why is gravel rounded? All over the world, you find gravel, and it's rounded. This was in a rock tumbler. This was tumbled back and forth for months during Noah's flood. Why would you say? I would predict gravel worldwide will be round. I've never been to Nepal, but I bet if we went over and got some gravel from Nepal, we'd find it's rounded too. I bet if we got gravel from South Africa, it would be rounded. I bet if we get gravel from Ecuador, it'll be rounded. I'd be willing to predict, without even going to these countries, the gravel in those countries is rounded. How's that for a prediction, Tony? I think it's because of Noah's flood was worldwide. Now, you don't want to believe in that flood. I understand, because it represents the judgment of God. No fossils count. There are 6 meanings to the word evolution. I'll be glad to debate that with you anytime. You guys try to give examples of minor changes, microevolution, and claim that that somehow proves the whole theory that we all came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. That is ludicrous. That's not common sense. Okay, how long did I take there? Slide number 101, Alt-DV.
You're at about 7.5 minutes, Dr. Hovind.
Okay, I'll give you a couple more here. Dogs, there are 339 recognized breeds of dogs. Which has more scientific application, creation or evolutionism, the title of the debate? They are still bringing forth after their kind. The Bible says they would always bring forth after their kind. Dogs produce dogs. So which has more scientific application? Are they still bringing forth? Is this still a dog and this still a dog? Is that evidence they came from an amoeba? By your theory, they came from an amoeba. So, well, dog breeders will tell you there are limits to the dog variations. Can you ever get one as big as Texas or one as small as a flea? There are animals as small as a flea, like a flea. So why don't we get a dog as small as a flea? Which has more scientific application? Well, my Bible says they're going to bring forth after their kind. I think that's what we see. Your theory says humans and dogs and whales and fish and trees all had a common ancestor. Does evolution theory that everything is related to a common ancestor, does that have some kind of application to real world? The Bible says they'll bring forth after their kind 20 times in the first 7 chapters, 10 times in the first chapter. Every farmer in history knows the scientific application of believing this. It works every time. When they crossbreed their cows, they expect to get a calf, and they get one. The Bible says they'll bring forth after their kind. Now, Charlie Darwin wrote a book called The Origin of Species. All we've ever seen is what's called microevolution. They say in this Berkeley University, pesticide resistance, herbicide resistance, antibiotic resistance are examples of microevolution. It's still the same kind. It's a bacteria. Which has more scientific application? They're still bringing forth after their kind. The Bible predicted that would happen. So what exactly is the real science behind antibiotic resistance? Is this herbicide resistance enough to convince you that humans and all these creatures have a common ancestor? How about the sparrow population? Up in the north where it gets colder, the sparrows are slightly larger than they are down south. They need a bigger body to stay warm, and this is one of the evidences for evolution. Hello, it's still a sparrow. Is that microevolution? Which has more scientific application? They're still bringing forth after their kind. A 3-year-old will tell you it's a sparrow, or at least a bird. What exactly is the science you're trying to teach us here, Tony? Do you think this variations in the sparrow population is enough to convince us that humans and birds and pine trees have a common ancestor? How about the mosquito population? They've discovered now, because of global warming, Berkeley University warns us, that this mosquito has evolved in response to global warming. Really, what did it evolve? Well, it evolved, it now waits 9 more days before it goes dormant. Oh, so instead of June 1st, it goes dormant on June 10th, or whatever the date is, at 50 degrees north latitude. Hello, it is still a mosquito. They're still bringing forth after their kind, a mosquito. The fact that it waits 9 extra days to go to sleep, is that evidence enough to convince you that mosquitoes and sparrows and whales came from an amoeba? And you want that to be forced on everybody in the school system? Every kid has to learn that? It's still a mosquito, for heaven's sake. We see these charts in the books all the time. Animals and bacteria and plants all have a common ancestor. This is not science. This is propaganda. What is the scientific application for believing that animals and mosquitoes have a common ancestor? Where does this fit in? They did it. Kent Hovind taught me real science. One of your segments, Tony, you did a year ago. I'm trying to teach you, Tony, some real science, okay? They're going to bring forth after their kind. There's no real scientific evidence that any of these animals are related to each other. There's no evidence that any of these creatures on these charts even had children. There's no way to prove they had children that lived. If you want that to be your grandpa, go ahead. I don't care what you believe, but it's not science. There's no real scientific evidence that any of these living things are related. You cannot give scientific evidence that a human and a spider have a common ancestor. What would the scientific application be of believing that a human and a spider and a seaweed have common ancestor? This is ludicrous, okay? But these kind of charts are all over the books. I got hundreds of them here in my library. They're saying the humans and the jellyfish have a common ancestor. Oh, and so do all the rest of them. Tony, what is the scientific application of believing in evolution? I see no scientific evidence, there's no application for it. It's a completely useless theory. It doesn't predict anything. The flood would form all these layers, all these fossils, the rounded gravel, did it all very quickly. Your turn, Tony, let's hear it.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Hovind seems to understand the idea of an explanation. And yeah, creationism can explain a lot of things, but that doesn't give it scientific application. What gives something scientific application is that it can predict the future evidence, which means it has a real world application. And, you know, the funny thing is, you stated that no fossils would ever count as evidence in a court of law because we can't prove that any of them ever were reproducing. Seems that you've forgotten about the Dover trial when fossil whales, among other lineages, were in fact accepted as evidence for evolution. This is a court of law. I wonder if you've ever thought about the oft-made claim by scientists, however, that even if we had zero fossils, we would still have overwhelming evidence for evolution. Now, this is where the prediction comes in. The idea that a spider is related to, you know, I don't know, a human or to a tree. This overwhelming evidence comes in the form of genetics. The fact that we can demonstrate genetic relationship between organisms. You may argue that this is not evidence of a common ancestor, but of a common designer. But once again, I'll point out that this was never predicted by creationists until after this homology was discovered. The reason we know about this homology, however, is because it came about by testing the prediction made ahead of time by the theory of common descent. And since scientific predictions are falsifiable, if we hadn't seen homology between species, common descent would have needed to be severely revised. Yet creationism would have been unaffected because it is unfalsifiable. Because if we did see no homology, you'd still be a creationist, wouldn't you? That's why creationism is scientifically useless. But let's go ahead and get back to the courts of law. This genetic test that we use to determine genetic relationship between species is the very same genetic test that we use to legally determine relationship between people. This not only continues to confirm the predictions of common descent every time we map the genome of a new species, but it also constitutes legal proof of common descent. Now, that said, you were talking about the Grand Canyon saying a river can't flow uphill, and I completely agree. That's absolutely true. As it turns out, the entire area of the Grand Canyon is continuously rising due to subcrustal forces at a rate of 0.6 millimeters per year. The Kaibab uplift at the canyon's base is also uplifting at various rates. These alternating uplifts have been responsible for the course changes in the river several times in the geological history. So the answer to your question is that the Colorado River never did flow uphill. The area rose around it. Now, that said, you talked about the Big Bang there. Now, with this, I didn't think you'd actually bring it up, but many people have cited that the Big Bang theory is a prediction of a creation event. I don't think you say that, but they'll even go so far as to point out that Georges Lemaitre, who popularized the theory, was himself a creationist. But contrary to popular belief, this cosmological model was first formulated in 1922 by Alexander Friedman to little attention until rediscovered in 1927 by Georges Lemaitre. The model states that at some point in the finite past, all of the matter and energy in the universe was much closer, perhaps even being condensed into a volume as small as an atom. Now, using this model in 1946, George Gamow published a paper describing how radiation could recombine and become basic atoms after a Big Bang. He theorized that in the process of recombination, microwaves would be released at a temperature of 50 Kelvin. Now, this estimate was revised several times over the following years as quantum mechanics was discovered, and I'll probably discuss that later. But in 1964, Robert H. Dick, Jim Peebles, and David Wilkinson at Princeton University were preparing to search for microwave radiation as a means of testing their own theories. And they felt that the cosmic background radiation would have been released along with matter at the Big Bang, and due to billions of years of redshift, would be at a temperature of under 5 Kelvin. It so happened that at the same time, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson were working at nearby Bell Labs experimenting on bouncing radio waves off of Echo balloon satellites. And after canceling out any potential radio sources, they continued hearing a slow, low, steady, mysterious noise that persisted in their receiver. And they found that no matter where they pointed their receiver, it persisted. They discovered microwave background radiation at a temperature of 2.7 Kelvin. This confirmed the hypothesis of Dick, Peebles, and Wilkinson. In 1978, Penzias and Wilson were jointly awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics for their discovery. Now, this list of predictions goes on. I'll be happy to address that, of course. But at any rate, as far as dogs produce dogs, again, that's not even a prediction. You saw that dogs produce dogs, and you said, well, that kind of keeps with creationism. And evolution makes no other predictions about that. Evolution does not predict that dogs would produce anything other than dogs. You have been corrected on this thousands of times. Well, sorry, 187 times. My apologies. Oh. You've been corrected on this 187 times, and yet you still say this. Why do you keep misrepresenting us? This is one of your dishonesties. I don't understand why you do that. Now, the other thing, nobody debates or contests that catastrophes occur. What we contest is the idea that an entire worldwide catastrophe occurred. That's absolutely silly. We're discussing, again, predictive power. You have yet to show how any creationist has ever used the assumption of a creation event, let alone a flood event, to find anything that has never been discovered before. You're wondering what the real world application of evolution is. It's that we can make these predictions ahead of time and then discover them. Again, with the farmers, yeah, they absolutely know that they can change an organism over time. Now, maybe there are limits. We don't know what they are, but just to say there are limits, that's not even there's no quantification there. Clams. Why would we not expect to see clams buried and with their shells closed? They're diggers. They actually go under the earth. That's what they do. They dig into the earth and they keep their mouths closed most of the time. So we should expect to see that. That isn't a predict. Well, it is a prediction, but not made by evolution. But it is a prediction you can make just by looking at the real world. I wish I had the ability to show video and audio, and well, I've got audio, but pictures right now, because I do in fact have gravel in my yard that is jagged. It has jagged edges. I live out in the desert. I live near Red Rock Canyon. There is gravel there. It is not all rounded. Some of it is quite jagged. Nobody says that amoebas are the ancestor of any of any mammal or of any animal. That is, I don't know why you keep saying that. You've been corrected on that as well. Now, what you're wondering, why can't we breed a dog as big as Texas? How would a dog as big as Texas survive? That doesn't make sense at all. Where are you coming up with this? Now, the thing is, I don't know if my time is up. I don't know where. You just have this habit of going from subject to subject. People call it a gish gallop. I think it needs to be renamed the Hovind hustle, because that is pretty insane. So at any rate, the other thing is, you talked about planet Earth having the perfect amount of CO2 and oxygen. I did not say that at all. What I said was it had nothing but carbon dioxide to begin with. We can tell this because the very oldest strata we look at has no oxidation whatsoever. Only later do we see any signs of oxidation. So if you want to tell me that those areas where we don't see any oxidation are pre-flood, then you're going to have to explain why we see life there. Again, I don't know where we are. I don't know how much more time we have, but
I've got it at I've got Ken who went 12 minutes, and you've got another 2.5 minutes, and that would be equal time. So you can use that up if you'd like, Tony, and then we'll jump into discussion.
We gish galloped so much that I don't really have. I mean, I had to write down furiously and bring up my my evidence. Unfortunately, I can't produce the slides, so I'll just go ahead and move on to the next issue.
Okay, well, thanks for that rebuttal there, Tony. With a couple minutes left, we can just throw that into the discussion. Therefore, whichever one of the debaters would like to start, I've got the clock set here. We'll make sure there's no interruptions, and it's a smooth, free-flowing dialogue. Go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you. Tony, you mentioned I've been corrected on things quite a few times. Claiming that I'm wrong does not mean I've been corrected. I would say you've been corrected tonight. There's no evidence of any animal producing another animal ever. And your charts I showed right from the textbooks, they do teach we all came from an amoeba. Why would you say I've been corrected on that? I'm not been corrected. I was right. What do you mean corrected? About the oxygen, let's stick with just this one. They've always known the Earth has always had oxygen. Back in 1966, they said, what's the evidence for a primitive methane ammonia atmosphere? None. There's no evidence for it. This is National Academy of Sciences. How about 1976, 10 years later? There's no evidence in the sedimentary distribution of carbon, sulfur, iron, uranium of an oxygen-free atmosphere. Well, how about 1982? It was suggested from the time of the earliest dated rocks, Earth had an oxygen atmosphere. Whoa, 1992. The only trend in recent literature is far more oxygen than early claimed, okay? How about the year 2002? Earth may have had an oxygen-rich atmosphere as long as 3 billion years and possibly even earlier, from Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, the Commonwealth, okay? So you're simply mistaken. Here's 2018. Today, the atmosphere is 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen. In the early Earth, there was very little oxygen. 3.5 billion years ago, there was only 0.001%. This is pure propaganda. They're making this up. The Earth has always had oxygen, and I know it creates a giant problem for you guys who would like life to evolve in an oxygen-free environment. I cover that very thoroughly on my video number 4. So you're simply not up to date on the literature, Tony. There is no proof that the Earth was ever without oxygen. It's not true. You need to do some more reading. I'll send you my seminar series free if you'll watch it. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, Ken, I've actually watched every one of your episodes of your seminar.
Yay. Good.
I've watched every one of them more than once. Number one, I'm challenging you to show any scientific paper that has ever said animals have ever come from an amoeba. They never have ever claimed that. I challenge you to show anybody that. Now, as far as your statement about oxygen, because you had to go to another subject, not just one, but because you do usually say one subject at a time, here's the second subject. Oxygen. You should look at your own references. This is the problem this is something I've learned from you, and in that one video you cited, I actually point out that you will cite your own references, and then the average person will not bother to look them up. I have looked up those references. Almost every one of them, you're citing the abstract, where they state that yes, it is assumed that blah 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 happened, or that it is assumed that there was oxygen in the early Earth, and then the paper itself goes on to challenge that. The other thing is, one of your papers said that there could have been oxygen on Earth as early as 3 billion years ago. That's not the beginning of the Earth. The Earth is proposed to be 4.5 billion years. It's actually, if you even paid attention to what I said, I actually stated that the middle Archean is when we first see oxygenation or any kind of oxidation in the strata, which is 3.5 billion years ago. So even then, that is the earliest we see oxygen in the geological column. I know you got your own statements about the geological column, but either way, it's not that I was saying that your you're being corrected in that you're saying something that's true or untrue. You're saying what evolutionists, if I may use the term, are claiming. So that is where you're misrepresenting. You misrepresent what we are saying, as opposed to misrepresenting perhaps science itself. You are misrepresenting what other people say. Now, again, you still have yet to show a single prediction or any real world application of creationism. All you've shown is how we can look at something and say, oh, that happens to totally be conveniently supported by a creationist view. But oftentimes you're talking about things that were predicted ahead of time by evolution. That is all I have to say about that.
Okay, Tony, I will make a prediction right here in front of the whole world. I predict that one day you will die and stand before God and be judged. That's what the Bible says is going to happen to all of us. I predict if you don't have Jesus Christ as your Savior, you're going to go to hell. I'll make that prediction right here, right now. I don't want that for you, Tony. But you said that I'm saying it's wrong. This is the charts right out of the books. Humans, pine trees, whales, everybody came from a protista, a single-celled organism. That's what they're showing. I'm not making this up. I'm using the charts right out of the book. How about this one? All the animals, humans, everything goes back to a single-celled organism. What am I missing here? I didn't make this stuff up. Here is a, let's see, 2015 biology textbook used in Texas with a chart showing everything going back to a common ant. Does it have protista? I didn't have time to read it.
It's on the left.
On the left?
Really, really small.
Yeah, I don't have time to find it and read it here, but I'll scan it in and show it to you. The books do teach this, Tony. They do teach we came from a single-celled organism. And if you wish to believe that, that's fine. I don't care what you believe. I do resent that being taught as science, because it is not science to say we can show that humans and whales and dinosaurs and flowers came from a single-celled protista or an amoeba, whichever one you want to use, a single-celled creature. Don't accuse me of lying and misrepresenting things. I'm not misrepresenting the evolutionist position. I'm accurately showing it, and that's what bothers you, because it looks really stupid when it's shown on paper and somebody points it out. Go for it. Your turn.
Okay, first of all, your prediction that I'll die, again, that's really convenient to predict that after you've watched every person that's ever lived die. That's not a prediction. That's pretty much what we see every day. And you didn't get that from the Bible. You got that from watching people die. Second of all, here's the problem. You're saying, you're quoting single-celled animal and you're quoting protista. An amoeba is...
Wait, Tony, you left out the last half of my prediction. I predicted you're going to die and stand before God. I've never seen that. Okay, I predict it's going to happen. And I'm going to be standing there and say, Lord, I tried to warn him. I tried, Lord. Go ahead.
Hey, Kent, we agreed ahead of time not to interrupt each other. Did I interrupt you at all?
No, but you left out part of my prediction. That's all. Go ahead. Go ahead. Take all the time you want.
I'll get to that. Now, the second part is amoebas. Amoebas are not protistas. Thank you very much. And by the way, human beings are not protistas. They are not related. Okay, so yeah, do they say we came from a single-celled animal? Yeah. Do you want me to go over the cladistics of it? Because in fact, the whole idea of cladistics came about by a creationist by the name of Carolus Linnaeus. You know who he was. He was a creationist. He attempted to find the biblical kind, and everywhere he looked, he kept seeing commonalities enough that there was what he put together as a nested hierarchy, and every single creature he looked at continued to show this organism. They tended to show a nested hierarchy. Therefore, he was able to predict things like species, genus, and yet those I grant you that genus and family and class and order, those are all definitely human terms, and they are actually obsolete. But we do still put together this nested hierarchy based on his work. However, the whole reason we have the theory of, number one, evolution, but also the cladistics that we have, is because he failed to be able to find the created kinds. Now, as far as your prediction about me standing before God, You don't know anything about me. You don't even know if I'm a Christian or an atheist. I've never stated anything either way. And I don't care to debate that, because this is not about that. This is about science. Now, there is no science to be gained from stating that I will die and I will face a judgment. What practical application does that have in the world? I will grant you that in your view, that has a practical application in another world, but that's not science. That is definitely the supernatural. I'll let that go.
Well, I think the idea that we will stand before a judge, whether it be in eternity or whether it be here on earth, I mean, does the idea that people may have to go to court, get arrested, and stand before a judge, does that affect their behavior in the real world today? Why don't people drive 200 miles an hour on the highway? There are some cars that'll do that. Certainly some motorcycles will do that. Why don't they do it? Well, they're afraid they're going to go stand before the judge one day. They don't want that to happen. So yeah, the practical application of believing there's going to be a judgment for behavior is that it modifies behavior. Hopefully. That's the goal of all the laws that man passes. So as far as the nested hierarchies, if indeed your theory is true, that everything came from a common ancestor, a protista, which is what the books teach. I've seen some that say amoeba. I'll find it and quote it for you. They say, of course, dogs always produce dogs. Well, the amoeba produced the dogs, so the amoeba produced something, or the protista produced something that was non-protista. You guys don't understand the stupidity of the own theory that you say, well, of course, dogs produce dogs. It's always going to be that way. But yet you think it came from a single-celled creature. This is hypocritical at the least, lying probably at the worst. It's simply crazy. Why can we classify animals at all? Why can anybody say that's a dog, that's a cat? Where's the 99% dog? Where's the 98% dog? Why are there nested hierarchies at all? Why can we even classify them if evolution is true?
Are you done?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So as far as, I'll go ahead and go around this. I mean, again, it's like we said, falsifiability. Essentially, if a prediction wrong, it'll prove the theory wrong. In other words, if we don't see phenomenon C when we conduct experiment or observation B, then we know theory A is wrong. This is what's called the null hypothesis. So to reference this, cite an overused example, if we found fossil bunnies in the Precambrian, common descent would be completely falsified, but we don't. If we found that all strata in the geological column were found to be deposited under marine conditions, uniformitarianism would be falsified, but we don't find that. On the other hand, if we never found any fossils, as you predicted, it would have no bearing on the validity of your belief in creationism. Now, as far as the relationship, you've used this one before, and it seems like your followers are really big on this. As far as the relationship between, let's say, elephant and pine cones, round of applause, both are eukaryotes. You already know that. You state that being a eukaryote is a feature. You said that before. It doesn't prove relationship. And you're right. It doesn't prove creation. It doesn't prove relationship at all. It also doesn't prove creationism at all. Using common descent, though, we can falsifiably predict that all plants, fungi, and animals will possess the definitive features of a eukaryote. They are all eukaryotes. Using common descent, we can falsifiably predict that all cnidarians, like jellyfish, and all bilaterians, which are noted for bilateral symmetry, like all of us here, will still retain these animalian features. So for the sake of time, I'm going to neglect the other forks in the road here, but using common descent, we can falsifiably predict that all chordates, which are defined by a notochord, will retain bilaterian features. They are still bilaterians. We can also falsifiably predict that no bilaterians will have, or no non-bilaterians will have a notochord. So using common descent, we can also falsifiably predict that all chordates, which are defined by using common descent, we can also falsifiably predict that all mammals will be chordates. We can also falsifiably predict that no non-chordates will have definitive mammal characteristics. Using common descent, we can falsifiably predict that all elephants and primates will retain mammalian features. They are all mammals. We can also falsifiably predict that no non-mammals will retain the characteristics of whales or elephants or primates. In our own interest, using common descent, we can falsifiably predict that all humans will retain the definitive features of primates. This is extremely simplified, but this prediction holds true no matter which branches you choose to take in the nested hierarchy. In fact, you can make the same kinds of predictions going from eukaryotes to plants all the way to pine trees. And you might make the argument that this is the result of a common designer as opposed to common descent. The difference again here is that if we should ever find an organism that defies this nested hierarchy, common descent would be falsified, but you'd still be proclaiming a common designer because creationism can't be falsified. It's therefore scientifically useless. And the evidence of this is that, again, Carolus Linnaeus attempted to find this, to find the biblical times and failed. But here you are using a failed attempt at a falsified prediction of creationism as an argument for common design. The irony is thick here. There we go.
Well, you keep saying they retain characteristics. Your whole thing is based on the assumption that evolution happened and animals changed. They do teach in the textbooks that single-celled creatures slowly developed into insects, fish, amphibians, birds, monkeys, and humans. This is what they're saying. They're not showing, there's no evidence of this. Nobody's ever seen a butterfly produce a non-butterfly or a butterfly come from a non-butterfly. But this creature back here that turned into both the butterfly and the human, it had to change something. It had to change a whole bunch. There's a lot of difference between a butterfly and a human. So this is what's taught. My objection is this is not part of science. There's no scientific application, even for this teaching, even if it's true. They don't retain characteristics. The fact that we can classify animals at all. You mentioned something interesting, though. Elephants and pine cones are both eukaryotes, as if that somehow proves something. You guys, R and Rod did this all the time, too. Oh, they're both eukaryotes. Yes, boys and girls, eukaryotes developed way back here. That's all that means is the cell has a nucleus which is wrapped in a membrane. I could point out that rocks and ink pens are both attracted by gravity. Whoa, that proves they're related. They actually both take up space. Oh, wow, that proves they're related. This is such a dumb argument. The fact that they're all eukaryotes, come on, get something better than that. The fact that they all have cells which have a nucleus which is wrapped in a membrane does not prove a common ancestor. It's a common building block. I bet all the bicycles and cars and trucks in the world have iron in them. That proves they all came from an explosion in a metal factory. That's the kind of logic you guys use, and you don't see it. The Bible said the scoffers would come in the last days, and they'd be willingly ignorant of the creation. Tony, you don't want there to be a creator, is my prediction. When I really get to find out about you, you're going to say, I don't want, especially the God of the Bible, to be my creator. I don't want to do what he says. That's my prediction. I don't know anything about your lifestyle, but I'd be willing to bet there's a couple things in it that would violate the commandments given in that book, and that's why you hate that book so much. Your turn, Tony.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and go back to exactly what I said at the beginning of this debate. Nobody is saying that any theory can ever be proven. A theory does never graduate to the point of fact. Now, once again, you can make an explanation. I can explain that a pink donkey came in and spat this world into existence. Doesn't mean it's true, but it definitely can explain things. What evolution does, what uniformitarianism does, what the Big Bang Theory does, what abiogenesis does, is actually predict the evidence that we find before we find it. That's what makes it scientific. Now, like I said, even from the beginning, I'll even grant you that none of this happened. But using the assumption, and I'll grant you, it is an assumption because that's how a theory is tested. You assume a theory is true, and then say, if we assume this is true, we should see this. It doesn't mean that the theory is true. It just means this theory has predictive value. You have yet to show a single prediction that has ever been confirmed by testing any theory or hypothesis that was derived from the assumption of a creation event 6,000 years ago. And I'll just keep saying that again, because that's
Well,
what
I'm
makes
sure
it
you
work.
will. I'm sure you'll keep saying it until Judgment Day. That's fine.
Hold on
The theory
one
can't
second,
be
just to make
proven.
sure. Forgive me. I hate to just to be sure that Tony, were you done with your point?
What's that?
Well, just to be sure
Oh,
that you
yeah,
were done
yeah,
with your point. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
I'm done with my
Okay.
point.
So, Tony, if neither theory can be proven, which is what you clearly said a moment ago, then why do all of us have to pay for yours to be taught in the schools? I think a whole lot of people are sick of that. Why don't you people who believe you came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago, why don't you go start a private school and teach it without using all taxpayer money? And it's real estate taxes that pay for schools, by the way. Somebody's going to jump on the tax issue and say, Hovind and taxes. Mine was income tax, not real estate tax, and I didn't break the law then. See KentHovindinnocent.com, video number 3. But that's a different story. Real estate taxes pay for the schools. All of us are forced to pay for this one religion. This is in the textbooks. I've got hundreds of them here. I can show you. My objection is, I don't care if you believe this stuff. I care that you force everybody to pay to have your religion taught. That's the point. Evolution has no predictive power. The fact that you can find fossils in the ground could just as easily be explained by a flood. A policeman going to an accident, one guy might have a theory that this car was going this way, and they might have different theories of what happened. And they might work on those theories to try to develop reenact the crime or reenact the accident. Sure, we see fossils in the ground. We see layers of strata on top of each other. You guys are teaching the top layer is younger than the bottom layer. Oh, really? Where did it come from? Outer space? I think all these layers are the same age. They're all just, even if it's billions of years, they're all the same age. They just got reshuffled. So the idea that one layer can be younger than another is ludicrous on its face. And finding fossils in certain areas, of course, animals are sorted based upon their body density, based upon their habitat, based upon their mobility, based upon their intelligence. Clams are found at the bottom because, as far as we know, they're not too bright. And they're heavy. They got heavy shells. So I think I could predict the order of fossils based upon a flood. I'd be willing to predict the slower animals would be buried lower, or those that with more body density. Look up body density of reptile compared to body density of mammal or bird. I'd be willing to predict birds are found on top of strata generally, because birds are the last ones to drown in a flood. And when they drown, they have hollow bones, hollow feathers, they float. That'd be a prediction based on the flood model. So anyway, we're supposed to take Q&A from the audience. We've gone a long time here, brother, almost 2 hours. But let's do another one, Tony, anytime. Take you on, do another debate. Get your stuff together, okay?
Yeah, next time I'll have a better internet connection. However, if I may give you one little statement. This is not a refutation. I did a video about your legal troubles, but at no point in time did I ever ridicule you for tax evasion. In fact, what I understand, it wasn't just income tax, but also payroll tax. And I think that's the dumbest tax in the world, because why would you tax somebody for creating a job? I don't get that. That's another subject entirely. I hope you agree with me. But that said, as far as uniformity, again, with all those things you're talking about, predictions, why is it taught in school? It's because when we assume uniformitarianism, we can go and predict where we'll find oil, coal, gold, diamonds. But when you use creationism to predict these things, you never find them. That's it.
Gotcha. We've
gone way over. Let's just schedule another one another time, and I'll go back and listen to some of this, and I'll try to teach him, get him converted over. And I had the first word. He gets the last word.
You got it. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So we will now jump into the Q&A. So thanks for your questions, everybody, and thanks for hanging in there. I honestly enjoyed this so much. After we got through that little part, it's like, forgive me for my technical difficulties. And we got through it. And that debate, I honestly really enjoyed listening to this. This is just a great time. It's one of the better ones I've heard in such a long time. So Maynard Saves, thanks for your super chat. They said, Kent continually brings up scoffers and scorners, and this has nothing to do with the debate. He says, Matthew 7:15 says, beware of wolves in sheep's clothing, for they are ravenous. If we are scoffers, you, sir, are a wolf in sheep's clothing. We'll give you a chance to respond from the Team Hovind side, and just want to let everybody know, I forgot to mention, if you want to do go ahead.
How on earth can you respond to that? To say somebody, there's no evidence, there's no specific charge. That's like saying you're ugly. Well, what? My hair, my eyes, my nose. I mean, that's not. Tell them to give a specific charge, okay? That's not specific. That's generic. That's slap and run, third grade stuff, okay? Tell them I said they're a coward. Sweetly.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you very much. Stupid. This is her name, by the way. This is her own title on YouTube. Stupid Whore Energy says, how does Kent explain that a large number of predictions based on uniformitarianism in astronomy, for example, have turned out to be accurate?
I would challenge that completely. I'd like to see everyone individually and give me a chance to rebut everyone individually. I don't think there have been any predictions about this uniformitarianism. All of the stuff that's can just as easily be explained by creation. If they find background radiation, for instance, what does that prove? Does that prove a Big Bang? If we see stars are moving away, which we don't see them moving, we see a red shift and assume that it means moving away, Doppler effect, and it's probably true. Well, the Bible 17 times, the Bible says these stretched out the heavens. I bet if somebody would have read those verses about God stretching out the heavens, they would probably say, well, I bet we could predict, but they didn't know what a red shift was. They didn't know what light waves were, okay? So of course they can't predict. Someday we're going to discover light waves. Somebody could probably say someday we might discover evidence for the stars moving away because it says God stretched out the heavens. I think that could be predicted, but you can't. It's like a police going to an accident scene again, you know. Tony's all hung up on this predictive power, and so is your person asking this question. That's a ludicrous argument for evolution or against creation. Go ahead.
Standing for truth.
Can I respond to that?
Just to get through as many questions as possible, I can give you you know what?
I'll take less than 20 seconds.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we could have looked at the Bible and predicted that that we would have seen the universe expanding, but the Bible was there all the time, and people were reading it, and nobody predicted it until it was discovered.
Gotcha. Thank you. And standing for truth, just to be sure that you got the questions, the list will alternate. Sorry that I read two in a row. The floor is yours.
That's okay. So this is from username Pants L Jones. Thanks for your super chat. This question's for Tony. He asks, ribosomes read RNA and assemble proteins, including proteins that build ribosomes. Explain how ribosomes developed with Darwinian processes. Go ahead, Tony.
That's a great question. So if I don't have an explanation, it's now the ball's in your court. Show how creationism predicted it. That's it.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, appreciate your patience. We've got Robert. Oh, Movie Theory. Thanks. Says thanks for your super chat. They say thanks for all you do, James. I know it's not easy, but you always fight through. I appreciate all the debates. Thanks so much. That means so much after a long day. So thrilled to have you here. And Standing for Truth, back to you.
Awesome. So this one is from Robert Summers. The question is for Kent. He says, I want to ask Kent where he is getting his argument that uniformitarianism doesn't allow for local catastrophe. Go ahead, Dr. Hovind.
I never said it didn't, but they said, I gave the quotes at the beginning 2 hours ago when we started this. They're claiming that uniformitarianism, long, slow, gradual processes can explain it all. And I'm pointing out long, slow, gradual processes cannot explain it all. I've got the quotes. Let's see, slide number 28. Here we go. Uniformitarianism, the doctrine suggesting that Earth's geologic processes act in the same manner with essentially the same intensity in the past as they do in the present, and that is sufficient to account for all geologic change. Encyclopedia Britannica this afternoon, September 13th, 2019, they said uniformitarianism can explain for all the geology we see. So by this thinking, well, then that should be able to explain the crooked train track and the mudslides and earthquakes and landslides. It doesn't. There are catastrophes that rearrange things. There are continent-wide sediment layers. I think that would mean a really big flood. Tony wants it all to be local floods. The Bible said the scoffers would be willingly ignorant of the flood, and that's an example there. No, there was a global flood. There's enough water on the planet right now to cover the earth 1.5 miles deep. And if the crust of the earth is flexing up and down, and I agree, Grand Canyon, Kaibab Plateau is probably rising now, 0.6 of a millimeter a year because all the dirt washed out, and now the weight's gone and it's lifting up. It's probably isostatic rebound is happening at Grand Kaibab Plateau. But yeah, I don't think, I did quote right from the books, Uniformitarianism. That is what they teach.
20-second response?
Sure.
It's funny that he says that that shows that it's all slow uniformitarian processes. They're not. No uniformitarianisms. It's not all slow. Today, quick things happen. That's part of uniformitarianism too. That's it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Good. I know you got a response, but I just want to jump to the next one if possible. Pancel Jones, thanks for your super chat. They said, Tony, Darwinists called huge parts of the genome, quote, junk DNA, blocking scientific study of it. Studying nature as designed guides innovative engineering.
Okay, well, I know that's a statement, not a question, but in fact, I can actually quote Alan Cummings, who actually coined the term junk DNA, and he pointed out specifically that it doesn't mean useless. It just means it doesn't have an apparent function. And I will grant you that it seems like it might seem that it's useless, but I'll bet you every one of you has a junk drawer in your kitchen. I'll bet you some of you have been to a junkyard. Is all of that stuff useless? Or does it have use for other things? Or does it have use on rare occasions? That's what junk DNA is. And that's exactly what he said when he coined the term. In fact, he went on to name several uses for junk DNA. So the other thing is it blocked genetic research. All of the discoveries that we've made on DNA have been part of explaining or trying to figure out what junk DNA does. That's my answer.
Gotcha. Next
All right, quick response. I don't think there's proof that anything is junk DNA. I don't think that's possible to prove. Put a 5-year-old under the hood of your car and say, what doesn't this car need? Take out anything it doesn't need. You don't know what none of it does. He's going to take it all out of there. He doesn't know. That's all. Man looking at the DNA code of a single cell is like a 5-year-old looking at a jet engine trying to figure out what it needs. I think we have maybe way less than 1% understanding of the DNA code and the complexity of the cells of any living thing. One living cell is more complex than the space shuttle. A single cell. Average person has 100 trillion cells in their body. Some folks, many more than that. I'm trying to get rid of a couple, but that's okay. But there's no. I don't think you could prove there's any such thing as junk DNA to begin with. That's an example of our lack of knowledge. For years, they thought there was things that were unnecessary. Now, they thought they had 180 vestigial organs back in 1910. They thought you didn't need your tonsils, your adenoids. It went on 180 things. Now they know the use for all of them. The books still teach the tailbone is vestigial. You don't need it. Tony, if you believe the tailbone's vestigial, I will pay to have yours removed.
Well, since you brought that up, can I respond to it?
Sure, go for it.
Vestigial has never meant useless. Vestigial simply means that the original function of the structure is no longer served. That's it.
Okay.
Gotcha. Next up, Standing for Truth, I'll let you read.
This question is from Ashley DeMarco. She asks, Dr. Hovind, why does Kent pretend to not understand evolution? Go ahead.
I think you guys are pretending that I don't understand evolution. I understand what the theory says really well, better than you like it. I understand we see thousands of changes within the same kind, like the Bible says would happen. You see big sparrows and little sparrows, depending upon the temperature. You see mosquitoes having to stay awake 9 days longer because of the latitude or temperature. I understand completely what the theory says. I've got hundreds of books in front of me here. I understand. Don't say I don't understand it. I think it's stupid. I don't think with those little minor changes that everybody calls microevolution are ever going to add up to anything that's going to change an amoeba or a protista into a whale or a human or a pine tree. You guys are the ones that don't understand your own theory. I don't think the average Mormon understands what their church really teaches till they get to the top, and then it's, oh no. I don't think any of you understand what evolution theory teaches, that you came from a protista, and that came out of nothing. I don't think you understand how dumb that looks to the average person with half a brain. Go ahead.
Next up, we want to fly through as many super chats as we can. Sorry if Waynard Saves, thanks for your super chat. They said, Kent, have you ever seen a wolf produce a chihuahua?
I have never seen a wolf produce a wolf. I've never seen a wolf give birth to any babies, but I would assume that they did. But I think anybody would say, sure, variations happen. Wolf to Chihuahua is probably a reasonable conclusion that a wolf could gradually, or probably through selective breeding. I don't think Chihuahuas would ever be developed in the wild. Even today, you turn them loose in the woods, they wouldn't last 20 minutes. They're a useless dog. But I think that man could manipulate the gene code and turn a wolf to a Chihuahua probably over a couple hundred years. But I would be willing to bet money they're never going to be able to turn a wolf to a butterfly. I'd be willing to bet on that, or a whale, or a pine tree. Wolf and Chihuahua have very similar DNA code. There's a lot of similarities in there, and I think they had a common ancestor. And it looked like a dog, hair on the outside, nose on the front, tail on the back, four-legged. I think anybody would classify them in the dog category. So no, I've never seen a wolf give birth to anything. Not that I'm against it, just don't get to watch that very often. Go ahead. I did raise hamsters, though. I saw that a lot.
Gotcha. Thank you. Stupid Horror Energy, thanks for your question. They asked, has Kent ever read Joseph Boxhorn's, quote, observed instances of speciation?
Wow. Never heard of the guy, never read the book. I bet there's several books I haven't read, but I read a lot. I mean, I'm willing to read, but I'm awful busy. But no, I haven't read that.
Gotcha. Standing for Truth?
Sure. Yeah, this is from Pants L. Jones. Thanks for your super chat there. Question is for Tony. Why did evolution produce aging? Go ahead.
Evolution produced aging?
Yep, I read it word for word. He said, why did evolution produce aging? That's all I got.
Aging is just a consequence of life. It has nothing to do with evolution. What evolution has done is produce organisms that happen to reproduce more successfully when they are replacing obsolete ancestors.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Let me give a response to quick one to that one.
Go ahead.
I've asked evolutionists many times. Tony, I'll ask you, why did all of these animals and plants evolve the ability to reproduce, which is pretty complicated, rather than why didn't any of them evolve the ability to live forever? That'd be a lot simpler. Why would any animal or plant want to make babies, which increases competition for itself? Hello? Why did aging evolve? That's a good question, Jones. I appreciate that. Why didn't any of them evolve immortality? Fair question.
Gotcha.
Definitely is.
Gotcha.
Do you want me to answer it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just like he argues that gravel ends up rounded, it's because the elements take their toll on you. Now, the point that he seems to be missing is that evolution does not predict that everything just automatically improves or gets perfect. What it does is say it keeps itself, or an organism will adjust to its environment to the point to where it survives more often. It has nothing to do with death. It has to do with birth.
I know you've got a response, but just to speed through these as fast as possible, we can give you a chance to respond in a bit, but just want to speed through a couple. C. Darwin, thanks for your super chat. They said, please take my money, James. Thanks. That's funny. And thanks for your support, especially on a hard day. Brian Stevens, thanks for your super chat. He said, Kent, during the last debate you did, I explained once again that a dog producing a non-dog would disprove evolution. You refuse to understand this. Let's see.
Oh, I completely understand it. Do they think this original protista produced a non-protista?
No.
They do.
They don't.
The chart shows a protista going to a human. Somewhere along the line, it changed from the protistas are still having babies today. Why don't they make another elephant or human or pine tree? You do think protistas produce something other than their kind. Your charts show it in the books, and I got to pay for that. Don't say you don't teach that. They do teach that. That's my objection.
No, they don't.
I'll show you the chart again. Let me get it up here.
We can.
Right. Hang on. I got it here. Right here.
Brian said, this is related. Brian Stevens said, JF explained this to you for the 1000th time. So we'll give you a chance to bring the chart up. Oh, that was a super chat that was connected to the same one. And
what is that a question for me? I didn't get it.
Oh, it was like a branch off from that question where he said, JF, the last gentleman you debated on here, he said, JF explained this to you about the dog, non-dog thing for the 1000th time. So
explained it to me? That's a slap and run technique. He didn't explain it to him. He made a statement. I countered it. The books do teach the protista turned into a bunch of stuff that is non-protista. What are these lines on this paper showing?
One that does.
What?
You've yet to show one that does.
I agree. You guys have yet to show a protista produce a non-protista. That's why your theories are religion. All these lines are religious belief. None of them are science. None of them. Nobody ever sees a protista produce a non-protista. Nobody ever sees a whale produce a non-whale. Nobody ever sees a crab produce a non-crab. But yet you got lines connecting them all like it's some kind of science, and it's absolute insanity. It's dumb. These charts are, the books are full of this stuff. Google family tree, and it'll have a protista, or an amoeba in some cases, producing all these life forms. Is a protista a dinosaur? Or did somewhere along the line the protista produced a non-protista? I'm tired, I need to go to bed. So
I predict you'll never show a textbook that shows that.
1 second. We just...
I'm showing you one. Right out of the textbook over here on the shelf. They do teach, these kind of charts are in all the books. Tony, get up to date, son. Look, Google evolution family tree, and you will see a single-celled creature becoming a human and a whale and an amoeba. Is this a whale or a human or an amoeba, or did it somehow change to something other than its kind? Don't tell me they've explained to me about dogs. I understand dogs produce dogs, and protista produce protista. So protista cannot turn into a dinosaur and a human. This is baloney. This is the kind of stuff you spread on your plants for fertilizer. Go ahead.
We have got one more super chat. Brian Stevens, thanks for your super chats tonight. He said, Kent, if you want your views to be taught in school, please use your 3 PhDs to publish and to have your work peer reviewed. Please use your 3 PhDs. We'll give you a chance to respond.
Here we go. Back to the ad hominem attack. No, that's okay. I'll skip that one. Go ahead.
Gotcha. And with that, hold on 1 second. Mississippi Wildlife, thanks for your super chat. This is related. They said, does Kent Hovind have a PhD? If so, where from?
Oh, God.
Do you want to go there, James?
Even I know that we don't want to go there.
Gotcha.
Oh, I'm not afraid to go there, but go ahead.
Gotcha.
I'm not afraid to go there. Just a silly argument.
Sure. If somebody went to school for years and got a legitimate PhD from Harvard University and came out believing they came from a protista, I would think their education's kind of stupid. Okay, go ahead. But that's okay. We won't argue that.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. And let's see. Forgive me, we had said that would be the last one. So just want to wrap up because the debaters have spent a ton of extra time here. We are indebted to them. We want to say thanks so much for being here, gentlemen. We appreciate it so much. So with that, their links are in the description. So if anybody out there enjoyed listening, we encourage you to check out their links, which are down there in the description. And also there are polls for this. This is the first debate in which we'd had polls. So down below, we have a poll for the pre-debate, which is, I think, closed now, and the post-debate poll, I think, just opened. So with that, gentlemen, one last time, thanks again so much for being here. We really appreciate you spending your time with us.
Glad to do it. Anytime.
With that, everybody, take care. And thanks, Standing for Truth, for arranging this debate. We really appreciate it as he connected with both, you could say, Team Reed and Team Hovind. So I want to say take care, everybody, and have a fantastic night.